President-elect Trump, he's already picked 3 former generals. We have retired Marine General James Mattis for Defense Secretary, former Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, he got the nod as National Security Advisor, retired Marine General John Kelly for Secretary of Homeland Security. And there's more names in the offing. I want to bring in Mike Lyons, military analyst, retired captain of the U.S. Army who served in Iraq and good friend to the program. Okay, for folks who don't know or kind of know a little bit, we have a history of a separation or a civilian that runs defense here because we'll give them the rationales and how, especially since World War II here, the prevalence of generals in cabinets has been historically much smaller than what we're seeing now.
Well, first, he's where Obama was at the start of his administration. 3 general officers in the beginning. Obama had Shinseki, had Blair, had General Jones, National Security. So we're even so far. Now, again, if he brings in Petraeus, brings in somebody else, maybe that we can have that discussion. But for all practical purposes, these individuals have been retired for a while. They've been on the front. Obviously, Flynn has been working with him on the campaign. General Kelly is an interesting pick. He was a Southern commander, SOCOM is what it's called, and he had responsibility for that Mexican border.
Yep.
And so he's very familiar with the interdictions and drugs and all the things that go on there. So he brings a specific skill set to the table that, frankly, no one has before in that position. Now, and I think it's about good athletes. And I think Donald Trump is looking for the best athletes he can get for his cabinet. And when you think about it, a guy like General Kelly is perfect.
Now, first off, Petraeus. I'm maybe scared less than some others. Interesting, Paula Broadwell, who was the girlfriend that he passed along. It wasn't even, he just basically gave her, national secrets here in helping to pen his book while he was having an affair with her. He's one of the names among 9, I guess, is being considered for Secretary of State. Is that a bridge too far for you?
Yeah, it is for me. I've been on the show and said that for the same reason Hillary Clinton would have been disqualified, I think General Petraeus has the same problem. I mean, as much as I think he could serve, he'd have to go over a pretty big hurdle. And I think right now, initially in this campaign, it'd be difficult for him to do. His problem with what he did with classified information is just the same as Hillary Clinton's on some level. So I think he would bring that distraction to the cabinet.
Some of the names, Mad Dog Mattis and the rest here, we talked during the campaign trail when Trump said, among other things, that he knew more than the generals. When Trump was asked about, when other people said about sacrifice and everything else, he had his 4 deferments, didn't remember which leg it was that, or foot it was that got him out of service, had no problem with it, didn't set well with a lot of military folks. Has there been a 180 on this just because he's who he's surrounded himself with? What's his appeal and what's the concern about it?
There's been a right sizing. Look, when you pick General Mattis for your Secretary of Defense, he's not brought in a policy wonk or someone that's going to fix the Pentagon's budget problems or look at weapon systems 20 years in the future. He is a warrior, been a warrior his whole life. He's sending a message that that's going to be the priority now at the Pentagon. So down to the last guy in the foxhole, that's a good signal that they're feeling from the president-elect. Let's hope he gets help because to manage the Pentagon, all those people, is a tremendous job. So his undersecretaries are going to be important. But a guy like Mattis, all his life, has done things like set goals and objectives and then put in place those policies to implement those goals and objectives, and they're going to be warfighting.
I'm sorry, what's the advantage of having a warrior as your defense secretary? What's this message that you're sending, that we're going to go to war?
No, actually, so it's I think the opposite. Yeah, so exactly. Warriors, those guys, people like you've been in a combat zone, you do everything you can to avoid combat. I think that's lost on some people. You look at General Kelly, he's lost a son in combat. So you have people in the room now that are going to really think twice. You go back to the mistakes that the first Bush administration made. They brought in Colin Powell, their Secretary of State. Frankly, they didn't listen to him when they talked about going to Iraq. I think Donald Trump has put people that he's listening to. He's already listened to Mattis with regard to how he feels about torture. General Mattis talked to him and he said, with a 6-pack of beer and a pack of Marlboros, I can get a lot of information out. So he's surrounded himself with some pretty strong personalities that have been there and done that. And I think each of these individuals are going to very much put to task this capability of ours to go to war without a question.
Well, one of the stories, and whether it's true or not, we're not sure, but one of the reasons why Mattis was moved out under Obama was the conversation surrounding Iran.
Yeah.
And Mattis said, well, if we ended up doing a bombing sortie over where we think their nuclear programs were, this before the Iran deal was signed, and it doesn't work, what then? what power, and Obama thought he was moving too far along the bombing or more so the final option phase here with Iran. How does that work? Where's the line between following orders and then crafting policy if you're a defense secretary?
So the Iran deal, from Mattis's perspective, is this. It actually will put us further towards war than away from war, because it basically challenges them or dares them to violate the treaty. And given the fact that it's not as enforceable as we would like it to be, what's going to happen when Israel or one of our allies gets information that they have developed this nuclear weapon, or they've taken this breakout time and made it less than a year? We're going to be forced then to do something. And Obama's even said that when he was doing this deal. So for those of us in the military, we don't want a fait accompli. We don't want you to give you a treaty that when you violate it, all we have is the military option. That's what Mattis was concerned about. And that's what kind of fell on deaf ears, because this administration just wanted to do that deal on any level.
Well, there are sanctions. I mean, the sanctions immediately come back that led Iran towards making that deal in the first place.
Yeah, and you know how hard it's going to be to really put those sanctions back, given the fact that Iran is now going to be doing commerce with Russia, China, other countries, that there's no guarantee other countries will align those back. And on top of that is Israel. What happens when Israel finds out that the Iranians have a nuclear weapon and can deliver it? Who's going to control that operation?
You know, with the time I have it, we could relitigate the Iran deal, and I think we'll be here all hour, and legitimate points on both sides. But 3 Marines, or multiple Marines here, and more that are even being considered. As people in the military say, there's a big difference between Army, Marines. There's a big difference from a culture side, especially because, I'm sorry, from the outside it looks like Trump likes being around these guys, right?
Does.
He's not a military guy. He likes talking tough and everything else.
Right.
He likes kind of the vibe. What does it tell you that he's chosen Marines to round?
He's got West Point officers, actually, multiple working for him on the other side as well. And also General Dunford, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, is a Marine. So, you know, the Marines project power. That's what they do. They have come a long way. They've been there and done that again on the battlefield. And they have strong personalities, and I think that's what he likes from my perception and from what people talk to. He picks General Flynn because he's an intelligence officer, meaning he's collected intelligence on the enemy. He knows how to target. He'll go after ISIS and the terrorists, and you'll have General Mattis making sure that Iran deal stays the same.
And I'm sorry, but for me, it's funny the way we look at it. Petraeus, I can even give him more of a pass than you, but what Flynn did, or what his son did, and he advanced it with something that my 12-year-old would know is ridiculous, about burying tunnels behind a pizza parlor in D.C. where there's hidden sex rings with Hillary Clinton and John Podesta running, and he pushes it out and says, you decide, and then they try and get his kid's security clearance too, after he's the one who's propagating all this garbage. That's a problem, especially if he's the intelligence guy.
I think
and
so.
I know everybody thinks he's a smart guy.
Yeah, he
I
is.
haven't heard anybody say he's a dummy, but, you know, as much as Trump apparently is not even reading the policy briefings, he seems that he's going to outsource a lot. I'm sorry, Mike. You know.
Well, that job also is difficult because he has to coordinate the intelligence from the Department of Defense, NSI, all the different agencies. That remains to be seen. I do.
And I heard he doesn't play too well with others.
No, and some people think he's not going to last there very long because it's very important. Look, I want him to succeed. I want them all to succeed at this point. But the fact that he picked his son as the chief of staff, maybe it's probably not a good idea given what's happened. But we have to see. There's others that again are behind him that are ready to step in should he fail.
Give comfort to a lot of people who say, listen, Trump's already poking China. Who knows what his deal is with Russia? It's never made sense to anyone how much footsie he's played with Putin. But clearly, he's happy to rattle as many cages, threatening, if you don't pay the VIG here, we're not going to protect you if you're part of NATO, maybe even opting out of the agreement altogether. UN, what's it good for? And all that. My point is, if a guy is that casual and has no interest with nuance with foreign policy, and I'm not willing to give him the benefit of the doubt that it's all part of a grand strategy as of yet. Okay, the last 18 months, I think, back me up on it. Maybe I'll be proven wrong. Will the military guys be able to rein him in at all? Or do they, in some ways, egg him on if he's looking for a fight?
I don't think he wants to create wars and create situations. He's already said that we get involved too much on things that we shouldn't do.
But isn't he reckless with the language which will start something that he may not have intended?
Well, he's been elected to be disruptive, and that spans all areas: politics, local, foreign policy, military. I think that people are going to learn to hear him through a certain filter and recognize that certain things he says are actually going to be walked back eventually. What's going on in China right now, in particular, is I think possibly a pivot. It's not conceivable we have war with the Chinese. We couldn't manufacture.
Okay, but you know and I know, the greatest recruitment tool for ISIS, even if they're beginning to be marginalized, whatever will replace them in Syria, is the words of Donald Trump. It's not some hypothetical here. By every metric, they say this will help in the recruitment. And for a guy who's actually had to go out there, and as a guy who knows the kids in West Point are going out there, let alone all the enlisted guys, right? Well, you make jobs harder if you don't think and don't have a plan. Now, you don't have to agree with everything Obama does, but even his predecessors, they take care with what they say for a reason. Trump's not doing the fighting himself. He might have to have somebody, cover, the expression is the...
Right. What I do know is this. He'll be presented more courses of action that at least will be heard. I don't think this president wanted to hear a lot of different courses of action. He decided what he was going to do. I think from a military perspective, I know that he's going to have more things that the military thinks that we could do against ISIS in particular, shut down things that, for whatever reason, the last administration didn't want to go after.
You have very optimistic advantage in terms of how well he'll listen to others, let alone mull different considerations here. I hope, God knows, you're right here. And I maybe don't share some of the same concerns that the military guys, everybody thinks there's bloodlust going on. I think they're probably the last guys who want to play free and easy with military enterprise. You guys disagree?
I totally agree with you. I totally agree.
I worry. Depends on who. Some yes, some no.
All right. Mike, great job as always.
Thank you,
my friend. All right, coming up next, we're going to take a look a little closer to home, including Governor Cuomo's comments about the presidential race and why Trump won, plus continuing intrigue with the state Senate and why Cuomo isn't stepping in to work, as some would say, with his own party.